Have you ever wondered how an idea really spreads through a group? Or who the actual influencers are, not just the ones with the loudest voice? Well, today we're going to dive into something called social network analysis, which is this incredible way of making all those invisible connections visible.
We all feel connected, right? But what if you could actually measure those connections? What if you could draw a map to predict who's influential, find hidden communities, and watch how information flows from person to person? That is exactly what this is all about, and we're going to show you how it's done.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what social network analysis even is. Then, we'll break down the basic building blocks of any network. After that, we'll get into how to analyze its structure, find those all-important key players, and finally, we'll check out some of the actual tools people use to do this stuff. Sound good? Let's jump in. Okay, first things first. What in the world is social network analysis? Let's nail down a proper definition. Okay, I know that sounds a little academic, right? But let's break it down. It's basically a fancy way of saying we're going to look at relationships with numbers. We model people or groups as nodes. You can just think of them as dots. And their relationships as links or lines connecting the dots. The real secret sauce is analyzing the shape of that web of dots and lines to see how things like info or even a virus might spread through it. So why do we even care? Because once you can see the network, you kind of have superpowers. You can literally track how things spread. You can spot patterns you'd never see otherwise. You can identify these little hidden communities or cliques. And, this is the big one, you can figure out who really has influence.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. To read one of these network maps, you first have to understand the basic language.
You know, when you strip it all away, every single network, no matter how complicated, is made of just two things. First, you've got the actors. Those are the dots, the nodes. They can be people, companies, anything. And then you've got the relations. Those are the lines, the ties that connect them. Simple as that.
Now, a quick but super important detail. Not all connections are created equal. Some links are directed, meaning they only go one way. Think about Twitter. I can follow you, but you don't have to follow me back. Then you have undirected links, which are mutual, like a friendship on Facebook. If we're friends, the connection goes both ways. This little difference changes everything in the analysis.
So how do we get from this messy, real-life web of people to something a computer can actually crunch? It's basically a three-step process. You start with a visual map, it's called a sociogram. Then you turn that picture into a data matrix, which is pretty much just a spreadsheet saying who is connected to who. And finally, to make it super easy for a program to read, you simplify that spreadsheet into a long list of all the individual connections.
Okay, we've got our building blocks. Now we can start looking at the bigger picture. Let's see how analysts look at a network structure, from zooming in on one person all the way out to the whole system.
It helps to think about this at three different levels. At the macro level, you're looking at the whole forest. You're asking questions about the entire network's density and shape. Then you can zoom in to the micro level, where you're just looking at a single tree or one person. And right in the middle, you have the meso level, which is like looking at a specific grove of trees, finding those small groups and communities. Speaking of that micro-level view, one of the most useful tools is something called an ego network. It's super simple. You pick one person, the ego, and you map out everyone they're directly connected to, the alters. You even map out if their friends are friends with each other. It's like a personal snapshot of an individual's social universe. And this, right here, brings us to one of the most powerful, most exciting parts of social network analysis, finding the key players. So how do we actually measure something as fuzzy as influence? The answer is a concept called centrality.
There are a bunch of ways to measure centrality, but we're going to focus on four of the big ones. We've got degree, betweenness, closeness, and eigenvector. And what's so cool is that each one tells a totally different story about what it means to be important in a network. First up is degree centrality. This one's the most intuitive. It's literally just a count of how many direct connections somebody has. You can think of it as a popularity contest. High degree centrality usually means you're pretty active or well-known in that network. Next is betweenness centrality, and this one is fascinating. It's not about how many connections you have, but about where you are in the network. It measures how often you're on the shortest path between two other people. High betweenness means you're a broker, a gatekeeper. You control the flow. Then we've got closeness centrality.
This is all about efficiency. It measures, on average, how few steps it takes for you to reach every other person in the entire network. If your close-to centrality is high, you're in the perfect spot to spread a message really, really fast.
And finally, we have eigenvector centrality. Now, this one is pretty sophisticated. It basically says your influence depends on how influential your friends are. It's the perfect measure for that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's better to have one connection to a very important person than 10 connections to people on the fringe.
So this all sounds pretty amazing, right? But how do people actually do this? Let's take a quick look behind the curtain at the software that brings all of this to life. You need special software for this kind of work. For example, a program like Project is a powerhouse for handling huge, massive datasets. If your goal is to make really beautiful visualizations of different communities, something like VOSviewer is perfect. And some tools, like SiteSpace, are wild. They can even link your network data to real-world maps. Some of the most popular tools out there are heavy hitters like UCNet and Netminer. But here's the really cool part. You don't have to be a data scientist to get started. There's an amazing free tool called NodeXL, and it's basically a template that lets you start building and analyzing networks right inside of Microsoft Excel. How cool is that? So there you have it. We've seen how looking at the world as a network really gives us this key to unlock and see the invisible architecture that shapes our lives. It leaves you with just one question, right? Now that you know how to look for it, what hidden network in your own world would you want to make visible?